Thank you for tuning in on this China Café podcast. My name is Monique Knapen. I am the chair of the Association Netherlands-China. I hope you will enjoy our VNC China Café podcast. If you're interested in our other VNC activities, please visit our website of the VNC, vnc-china.nl. And if you want to receive our updates regularly, our newsletters and our magazine, then you can also consider become a member. Then you will always be updated. Thank you.
I welcome you very much to this last China Café of 2024. We call it the Christmas China Café. We want to zoom into the web shop landscape, the Chinese web shops active in the Netherlands and Europe. For this evening, I'm really happy that you found the time to come with us and listen to the interview that we're going to undertake about the Chinese web shops, mostly about Temu and Shein. Drastically changed our retail landscape here in Holland, also in Europe. They have sharp pricing, they have a wide variety of products, fast delivery times, very smart, user-friendly apps. So they have quickly gained a strong position in our markets. And we'd like to know how they can be successful in such a short time frame. What is the secret about this rapid growth? But we also want to look at the downsides maybe of these platforms, but these Chinese web shops, how do they address subjects like sustainability or ethics or labor conditions, all these kinds of things. And Ed, he's our China tech expert, I can boldly say. Ed is a prominent expert in digital technology. He's known for his insightful analyses that he makes in all kinds of reports that he writes for China Tech Buzz. Tech Buzz China. Do you have anything to add to introduce you?
Well, just maybe be careful when people call themselves experts. I don't call myself an expert, but you can call me expert.
I think in this audience, you're the expert on this field, no doubt there. Maybe good to say we are taping this interview with very sophisticated technology brought in by Ed. So we're going to make a podcast out of this later on so you can listen to the interview or share it with your friends. To start with the interview, can you tell us, Ed, how were these Chinese web shops able to enter into our market so forcefully and so successfully, actually?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to have some notes here. I can do most of this from the top of my mind, but just to make sure that I don't forget something important. So I think if we start with Temu, I think the most important thing to realize, and that's why a lot of businesses here in Europe underestimate them, is that Temu is actually a cross-border platform by Pinduoduo. And PDD is the second or third, depending on how you measure it, biggest e-commerce company in China. They have been really successful, especially in the last couple of years, because also consumers are more frugal. They don't spend that much, so they are looking for good deals. So they've been killing it in the Chinese market since 2016. And Pinduoduo has an enormous war chest of cash reserves that they've built up over the years. And therefore, they can spend enormous amounts of money, specifically in advertising, to promote their platform. They started in the US. They even got some advertising on the Super Bowl, during the Super Bowl in 2023. So enormous amount of money, especially also on social media. So that's one thing that they can invest a lot. And basically what they are doing is they're buying market share. They are buying just customers. The second thing is, if you then download the app, just like they do in China, they have all kinds of gamification inside the app. So, and one of the things that the app does is it promises you like cheap or even free products. But if you play these games, quite quickly you are asked to also invite your friends. and invite your family members because you need to invite people to finish these games. So that gamification sort of results in a member get member mechanic where you as a user basically for very little money create new users for them. And the final thing, the third thing is the low prices. Now the low prices, we'll talk about the low prices later on as well. But the low prices, which are sometimes like 50% of what you might pay on Amazon, also keep people hooked in the app. Now, on top of that, they've got a very good recommendation engine. So they figure out, just like TikTok does that with videos, they figure out what you find interesting and then serve you more of the same thing. So these are some of the success factors that made them very successful early on in the US and later, since May last year, in Europe as well.
And are they unique in this? So you're saying they have strong marketing budgets, they have this gamification and attracting new members systems, and the third one that you mentioned was the low pricing. But is this unique? I mean, Amazon is also known for that, I think.
Yeah, Amazon is also known for that. As a matter of fact, a lot of what you would buy on Amazon actually comes from China. Most of the Amazon sellers are actually located in Shenzhen, in China. So it's not unique from that perspective, but the pricing structure on Amazon is very different. So if you as a Chinese merchant sell things on Amazon, you need to pay a lot of commission. If you want to sell to Prime members, you need to pay for fulfillment by Amazon from one of their warehouses. So it gets shipped to the customer very quickly. So it's a different type of business model. And eventually what Temu is aiming for is to, after a while, because the prices will go up, as we'll talk about later, I'm sure, they end up at like 85% of the price of Amazon. So
that's competitive.
Yeah, so that's competitive. But when they launch in a market, it's like I said, it's like sometimes 50% or even less.
Yeah, that's the way to go then. And is that the same for Shein or Shine?
Shine. So it is Shein. It's actually an abbreviation of Shein site, as the company used to be called. They are active on the Western market for a longer time. As a matter of fact, they're not active. They're not selling in China at all. So they're only active in outside China. And they've been doing that for more than 10 years already. So they have had more time to basically build up their customer base. And again, by having very low prices on goods, but something that which is different from the approach of Temu is that, especially in the beginning, they used a lot of influencers. They would send these influencers like lots of free goods, and these influencers would then review that on YouTube, for instance, or other social media. And that's how they more slowly, bit by bit, build up their own name, shortened their name to Shein. And especially during the COVID years in the US, there was a boom in e-commerce buying. And that's where they sort of exploded during that period of time. And they became the biggest fast fashion company, the biggest fast fashion brands in the States in a few years.
And they don't have this big mother company like Pinduoduo behind them?
No, they've basically done all of that themselves. And their business model is also very different. So if you look at Pinduoduo or if you look at Temu, they basically don't buy things and they don't manufacture things. They are basically a platform where, in different models that we'll talk about, they sort of sell other people's, other merchants' stuff. Whereas Shein mostly is producing its own goods, manufacturing its own brand, primarily. So that's also a very different model that they use.
Yeah, they sell under the Shein brand, and Temu is more a shop name, let's say. Yeah. Okay, that's also different. And I assume that technologically speaking, they're also very clever in their app structures and their platform structures and their logistical innovations. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah, so if you look at Shein, Shein basically searches the web both through tools, but also through a lot of manual labor. So some people think that they have this amazing AI tool, but a lot of it is also still done manually for new trends. And then what they do is they have it produced in a very small batch. So they only have like 100 or 200, the quantity of 100, 200 made They put that in their warehouse. They put it on the website, and only the actual products that are selling well, they will produce again. They call that small batch fast reorder. So by doing that, they don't have a lot of the waste that some of the other fashion companies have. So that's one of their innovations. So they're basically their whole website is one big A/B test, where they constantly test and let the consumer decide what is successful and what needs to be reproduced. Another thing is that they are constantly they have about 300 main manufacturers that make products for Shein, and they will share data with those manufacturers. So they will tell them which products are doing well, and they will constantly, like I said, reorder new batches with these manufacturers. Another thing which is extremely smart, what they've done, not technologically, but from a supply chain point of view, is they actually have contracts with the suppliers of the raw materials, like for instance a textile. So a manufacturer can go into the database of Shein and order at a much lower price because Shein has negotiated very low prices from the raw material suppliers. And that's also one of the reasons why they can keep the prices low. So that's roughly the innovations that we see in that business model. If you look at Temu, of course, Temu has the history of Pinduoduo, and Pinduoduo is also quite good with AI and recommendation engines. And like I said, they can show you products that you might be interested in based on your previous purchases, but also on your browsing behavior. So they've got a very good recommendation engine.
But we like these shops as Dutch consumers. And what is it that we like as Dutch?
I don't like it.
No, but they have this market share and they are very successful.
Yeah.
So what is it that we like this anyway?
Yeah, so like I said, so I don't personally like it. I've said to the PR people of Temu, as a matter of fact, like I wouldn't shed a tear if your shop would disappear tomorrow. But I find it extremely interesting, and that's why I research and write so much about it. But why do we like it as Dutch people? But basically, we're all the same across the whole world, whether you're in China or whether you're in Europe or the States. We like low prices. We like good deals. Another thing is that they have a very large assortment because Temu can tap into the supply chain of Pinduoduo. And they've got millions of merchants and factories that they are working with. So they have all kinds of different products. And quite often they have very surprising products, like very cool stuff that you wouldn't think about. A lot of the things that you see, especially the stuff that they advertise on social media, is like, well, that's quite a cool product, as a matter of fact. So they have a surprising assortment. And then if you compare it to, for instance, to an Amazon is more expensive, but delivers very fast, within 1 to 3 days, say. So you might have to wait here in the Netherlands most of the time a week, but the price is much lower. So it's more like a trade-off. I don't mind waiting for that product so much or for a week if I get it that cheap. I don't have to have that tomorrow. So the combination of these things makes Temu a very compelling, a very interesting offer to consumers.
So mostly pricing and an attractive product range.
Correct. Yeah.
For Shein the same.
Shein basically the same, and that's of course Shein is primarily clothing, although they've also opened up a marketplace. I think they did that last year, so they've broadened the number of products they are selling. Most of the non-clothing stuff are not products that they are selling themselves, but are products that merchants are selling in models that are a bit like what Temu is also doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and how can they offer such a low price then?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I think that we have to realize that the D2C aspect, as they say, so it comes straight from the manufacturer. So instead of it being bought by a brand and going to a central warehouse, going to a retailer, etc., the chain is much shorter. So basically only Temu's warehouse is in between, and products go straight from, most of the time, from a factory to the Temu warehouse and then go to the consumer. So the chain is much shorter. They don't have all of those logistical movements and all of these retailers and wholesalers that all want to add their own margin on top of it. Now, a lot of the advantage that you have by doing that is destroyed by the logistical costs, of course, because all of these packages in the initial model that they started with, which they call the fully managed model, go straight from the Temu warehouse to the consumer. And on average, that costs them worldwide about $9. So the price advantage of the D2C is basically sort of destroyed by doing that. Then the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is Temu subsidizes a lot in the background. So you think that you're buying very cheap stuff, but they are actually giving you a discount without you knowing it. And that's the whole idea that they have, that you start using Temu, then you get free shipping. You get products that are basically 50% of what they are on Amazon. And then bit by bit, if they are active longer in the market, or they have you've bought several times on Temu, they start raising the prices. They start making the subsidizing in the back end smaller and smaller. And something, like I said, that might be 50% off, might be 85% off, still cheaper than in Amazon. But without you realizing, because you're already hooked on the app and you're already buying it because you think it's the cheapest place to go on the internet, you don't even compare prices anymore. So a lot of those low prices are not as low anymore after 1 year of using the app. Yeah.
And they do it in such small steps that you don't even notice it?
Yeah, unless you really pay attention to that. Another thing that they also do, which is where you get into the question about is this still ethical or not, is that they have a bidding system. And they basically, if a manufacturer has a certain product, they say, okay, you sell this product for a certain price. Temu never buys that. Temu never buys those goods. They stay owned by the manufacturer or the merchant. And if Temu cannot sell that product, then the merchant will have to come and pick it up, or he will start paying inventory costs. But when that product is in a warehouse and they see that that's actually a popular product and it starts selling well, then if they can find another manufacturer that makes that same product, they might say, can you give us a better price? So they have sort of a bidding auction system that constantly drives down the price. Now, if factory A already has its good in the warehouse and factory B can give a lower price, then the sales of factory A stop, the sales of factory B begin. The only thing that factory A can do is try to get under the price of factory B. Now, this is also one of the problematic aspects of Temu, because if you put too much pressure on this, it will start hurting the quality of those products.
Sure, yeah.
So the example I always give is if you buy a winter jacket on Temu and the merchants, the manufacturers have been pressured so much that they have actually decided to put less filling in a jacket,
you're getting cold.
You're going to be frigging cold the whole winter.
Yeah.
But on the picture, it still looks like the same jacket. So you can tell. But too much pressure in the bidding system will result in lower quality. And that's sort of the status that Temu got in about sometime earlier this year.
So it's tricky both on the supplier side and on the consumer side. Tricky in a way that there's a game constantly going on. And is that ethical?
Well, like I said, I think if you put too much pressure, but that's something that is happening in many ways in China at the moment, where there's so much pressure on these merchants and manufacturers that they don't actually make any money anymore, unless they use lower quality raw materials and they make worse products. And at the end of the day, we are the ones that are buying that. And that's where you see a lot of consumers complaining, especially earlier this year, about the quality of those. So it's not ethical, but it's a disadvantage of a model that they might think is very smart. So what they did, on the other hand, to try to sort of level out the quality level, they've implemented a penalty system. So they first tell these merchants, you need to lower your price constantly. But if your quality is too bad and consumers start complaining about that, I will give you a penalty. So you will have to pay me 5 times the price that we normally pay you as a penalty for each consumer complaint. Mm-hmm. So, and in some cases, they would even do that for the whole batch you deliver to the warehouse. And that resulted in a lot of merchants getting really upset because they were losing a lot of money. Because if you have to pay a fine of 5 times the price of a product that you already have a very small margin on, you're basically killing off those merchants. So that sort of got into an explosion this year, where there's a lot of protests taking place at the offices of Temu. And they've sort of started to make it less strict and less fierce, that penalty system. And they've also decided to put more emphasis on high quality suppliers. So they've actually decided to give more support to those suppliers that can give very good, innovative and high quality products. So they are changing their approach, but it's reached a point where it's like a house of cards and you put out one card and it could all collapse.
But do we know these things that you're telling now? I mean, this audience is learning that today, but as a Dutch consumer, are they aware of the impact of this way of working? Maybe also from an environmental point of view?
I think that overall the knowledge of the consumers about how these types of companies work is very limited. They just see very low prices. Having said that, I speak to a lot of retailers and e-commerce companies, and their level of knowledge about, and you probably know it as well, John, the level of knowledge about Chinese companies is really, really limited. And we're very complacent. And what I see happening is if a company like Temu comes to our market, then people don't realize the threat because they don't know the company behind it. They don't know Pinduoduo. And they don't know that Pinduoduo in a couple of years or in a few years took away 20% market share for Alibaba. So they don't realize what's happening. Now, as far as sustainability is concerned, of course, there's a lot of consumers complaining about the bad quality. And especially in the case of Shein, also the quality of the clothing, that there's a lot of polyester being used in those clothing, and they basically end up in landfills. Don't know if anybody saw that new documentary by now on Netflix. Do go and watch that. It's very interesting. So, but at the end of the day, the problem is that we are sort of stuck in this consumerism that we want to buy stuff and we cannot say no to a good deal. It's the same thing as if you walk into an Action.
Yeah.
You didn't want to buy anything, but you come back with 2 shopping bags full of crap that you never use again. So, and that's the online version of it. So even if people know, a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of consumers don't really care about it.
I would think as a Dutch consumer, you think that if a company is active on our market, then there are regulations for it and CE marking and all these kinds of certifications.
Like China export, China export market.
No, but as a Dutch consumer, you trust the systems. Do they pass the systems?
Yeah. So the thing is, we have these systems in place, but Temu, a lot of these systems don't apply for Temu. For instance, if you import products into the European market as an importer or as a brand, and then you have to follow certain regulations about the quality and the safety of products. But there is not a real importer here. They say that the consumer is the importer according to terms and conditions, but there's no real importer, so nobody checks the quality. Now, what Temu does is when a product gets listed and arrives at their warehouse for the first time, they do a quality check. But like I said, if you keep pressuring those manufacturers, the quality will go down. And they probably don't do that constantly for the same product. They've got too many products for that. So they sort of have a way of going around it. The same with import taxes. If you import, then you would normally have to pay import taxes. But because there is a threshold of €150 and it arrives as a small package from a different country, from China in this case, they don't have to pay import tax. But that's not something that they've made up, right? That's something that has been here for a long time. And all kinds of drop shippers have been able to use that same system. It's only because now the volume is so enormous that Shein and Temu are importing into the market, that it's becoming a problem. And rightfully so, probably. The retailers are starting to complain about that because there's no level playing field. But they basically follow the legislation that we've made ourselves.
So actually their business model is a tool to circumvent our legislation because it's business to consumer directly. No retail or importer in between? So
Well, I wouldn't say that it's specifically their business model, but they are using the shortcomings in our legislation.
yeah, it's a short.
So, and that's why you see that the European Union is now discussing maybe we should do something about that 150 euro threshold. Maybe we should lower it or we should abandon it. And they are talking about doing that in 2028.
That's slow.
Now, it's slow now, and anybody that knows about China speed, as soon as Temu heard about that, they had that fully managed model, as they call it, where they send packages from their warehouses in China. But they've implemented what they call a semi-managed model, where they basically say to the merchant, you ship it to a warehouse, for instance, in the Netherlands, and then you are responsible for sending it to the consumer. We will determine the actual price for the product. So we have pricing authority, but it's already imported into the market. So by the time that both here in Europe with the 150 euro and in the de minimis rule in the US is even $800, by the time that gets changed, a lot of these goods are already in our markets, in our warehouses. So they are much more agile and they react much faster than we can legislate.
Yeah.
So one of the things, we should pay much more attention at what's coming to us, not just in the case of Chinese web shops, but also in the case of electronic vehicles. So we don't realize how advanced some of these things already are in China, and we constantly get surprised by these things. And when we do get surprised by it, we complain about it, and we think that new legislation and regulations will sort of make them go away. They won't go away.
They won't go away.
Because they are much more agile, and they will have changed their business model before we've implemented a new legislation.
Yeah. And how do they themselves listen to the criticism that we have on their companies and on their way of working, like, for instance, labor conditions and forced labor and sustainability you've already mentioned, but there is serious criticism.
Yeah, there's serious criticism. Specifically, if I can point out the labor conditions, I find that always a very hypocritical one.
Okay.
Again, like I said, I don't particularly like these web shops, but if I see people on social media and on LinkedIn and Twitter complain that, this is all made by child labor. These people have no knowledge about what factories in China are like. If they say, but these people, they have to work very long hours. Yeah, but these laborers themselves also want to work very long hours because they come from the countryside. They left their kids at home. They want to make as much money as possible and then go back, or they have to buy a house for their son because without a house, their son would not find a wife. So we see these things through a Western work-life balance, rose-colored glasses, not having any knowledge about what life is really like in China. And yes, there are labor laws that say you cannot work more than 40 hours. But if the laborers want it and the factory boss wants it and the local party secretary, he looks the other way because it's good for his GDP.
It's
the mountains are high and the emperor is far away.
Yeah.
So that's, as far as labor costs or labor conditions are concerned, I find it very hypocritical because Temu and Shein didn't create these factories. They were already producing goods for us. And everybody seems to have forgotten about that. So I find that very hypocritical. At the same time, especially if you look at sustainability, the quality of the products, also the lots of clothing with the polyester in it.
Yeah, or Xinjiang cotton.
Yeah, Xinjiang cotton. Yeah, I think that's a very difficult one also to prove if that happens and if that is used in your product. But it is something that we should continue to keep an eye on. What you see is not so much in these areas, but especially in the areas of quality management and compliance, for instance, with legislation on data security, etc., that these companies are really listening to what we want. Because they realize if they don't do what the DSA and other legislation says, that they will be shut down in Europe, or they will get very high fines. But the approach that Temu and other companies also have, and people that are speak Chinese or are from China, you probably know the term 差不多. So yeah, 差不多. So it's good enough to launch. So they launch these apps and these products while they're not quite compliant and ready yet. There was a TikTok shop.
The 80-20, 80%, 20% failure.
Yeah, and maybe in China
balance.
it's 2080. but they launched these apps, and they might have been largely copied from the domestic app and not be compliant with our rules. But they want speed, and they want to launch. A TikTok shop employee once said that Temu is getting on the bus and buying the ticket later, because they want to launch, they want to grab that market share. And if somebody starts complaining in the EU or in the US, they'll fix it. And like I said, they're so agile that they will be able to fix it. They have increased the number of people that work in their compliance team in China in May, because of all of these new legislations that they had to comply with. So they do listen, but only if we make them.
And the app also gives the opportunity to make this criticism arrive at the right desks.
I'm not sure if the app gives this opportunity. I mean, a lot of the things that happen inside the Pinduoduo app are actually driven by AI. For instance, you'll hear a lot of people also complaining, consumer organizations complaining, like there is... it's very difficult to contact the merchant and get your money back. But the thing is, if you go into the app, you can actually go to the product. You can say it's not good, and you need to upload 1 or 2 pictures to prove that you actually have it, and you get your money back within 24 hours. But you don't have to contact the merchant anymore. All of that is the efficiency from the mother company, Pinduoduo. So you don't even have to do that. I guess that if you as a consumer want to try to contact somebody at Temu,
that's impossible.
That's probably virtually impossible.
Yeah. And how about product safety and quality? They're constantly learning. Do you see a same speed in improvement as the level of criticism that is becoming more and more? Is that in balance, you think?
Yeah, one of the things that happened in the earnings call for Pinduoduo, not this quarter, but the quarter before, is they actually warned the shareholders that the profitability of the company would go down in short term, because they are investing in higher quality merchants. So they've given off this very important signal, and of course their stock price took a dive because of that, because that's not the thing that shareholders want to hear. But they did make a very strong commitment saying that we will improve the quality, we will support high quality manufacturers in the future. And they are trying to get rid of the reputation of being a bad quality web shop.
Yeah.
So they do
listen. Yeah. And what about the stories that you read, for instance, in the Linda? I don't know if you read it. It's not a scientific magazine at all, but it's very well read. And it says that there are all kinds of backdoors in these apps, and they will take over your phone and they will use your data. What's true? It's a grisly research. Yeah. It's quite
so, I mean, you can be sure, as with any app, that your data is being used by the company to sell you more products. I mean, that's the whole idea, or to sell advertising to people that are selling products on the platform to you. That's basically how all of these platforms work. There's 2 things that happen with this kind of criticism. One thing is that there was grisly research. They put out a report on Pinduoduo and they said all kinds of things are wrong with their apps. What a lot of people don't realize is that the company behind it are actually short sellers. So they manipulate the stock price to profit from that. And if you open up the report that they wrote on Pinduoduo, it actually starts with a statement saying, everything contained in this report is based on our opinions and not on facts.
Not on facts.
But nobody reads that. They just click and they go for all of the creepy stuff that's in that report.
Sells that kind of line.
And you see that people with no knowledge just repeat these kinds of stories. And it's sort of like, no pun intended, Chinese whispers, and they get worse and worse every time. You get people saying they earn only 15% of their money from selling you goods and 85% of their money from selling your data. That would be incredibly stupid if you're trying to be the biggest e-commerce company in the world, to sell the data to somebody else.
That's not a business model.
No. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there's, of course, this recurring thing that all your data goes to a Chinese company. And the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, can ask all of these companies for your data because of the national security law. But we also have those kinds of laws. Now, the thing is that according to the legislation, yeah, they can be forced to share data with the Chinese Communist Party in case of national security. But you buying cat coasters on Temu is not something that I can quickly relate to. So it's a kind of thing as well. If it can happen, how logical is it? And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because even if you have that law, if the CCP would really want your data, they would get it anywhere. Yeah, that's basically how it works. But it's mostly on a case-to-case business. But because a lot of people have this idea of the big bad China and the big bad Communist Party in China, we sort of project that on anything that happens, whether it's a TikTok or whether it's a Temu or whatever app it is, that something creepy is going to happen to your data.
Yeah,
I think there's creepier things going on with some of the data that's used by
it's
American
a good
companies.
article. It's very catchy, and it's, I think, the problem for all the subjects which are China related now, that the media are not fully informed, or using old 10-year-old sources and paint a picture that is not always reality. And that's why we need these kinds of experts and interviews and events to know more nuance on that. That's very clear. How would you think that these developments and strategies be over 5 years from now? Where will Temu and Shein be? Are they still here?
So it's for Chinese companies, it's always very difficult to make predictions. Tech was China, Rui Ma, my colleague, asked me to write predictions for next year. I even struggle with that. But what I can tell you is what Temu wants itself. So they currently, last year, so we're talking about the pricing, and of course they lose money because they're buying market share. Last year they had a loss of 27% compared to the revenue they had, the sales they had. This year, they already brought it down to 15%. Next year, they will be profitable. The year after, they will start making money. And within, I think, 2026, 2027, they are expecting to have a global gross merchandise value of $150 billion US. What they want is they want to become number 2 in America, because they know they cannot beat Amazon. Amazon is too prominent, too strong. And they want to become number 1 in Europe, which is much easier because the European e-commerce market is very fragmented.
Yeah.
So if we take into account that, yes, we will implement new legislation, but they're faster than the legislation, they will comply with it, they will become a prominent of a compliant. So I expect them to be a very prominent player in the future. Now, something else that is happening is now that they are also putting the merchants, or asking the merchants to put their materials inside the warehouses closer to the consumer, they can also sell things that normally don't fit in a small package in an airplane. So they've started selling fat bikes. They've started selling furniture. They can sell all kinds of bulky products. And that's also something that I quite often tell the audiences if I speak at places like this here. Like, if you thought that your product category is safe from Temu, think again, because anything that is made in China can eventually be, through one of their business models, be sold directly to your customers.
Yeah.
And they will also, just like Pinduoduo has been able to do in China, they will also get brands on their platform. It will take them time. It will not be easy, because just like AliExpress tried to get brands on the AliExpress platform, those brands said, I don't want to be on a platform that sells all kinds of junk. So, but they've, and it's too much to go into here, but they've succeeded in doing that in China as well. So I think that those people that think that Temu will go away, and Shein will go away, Shein will have an IPO in London. They will have a lot of new money to invest. One of the things that they are investing in is setting up manufacturing, for instance, in Turkey, so they can be closer.
Yeah, that would be my next question. Would they be closer to the consumer?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that they will be doing, and they will have more money also to compete with Temu, because at the end of the day, it's especially those Chinese platforms that are competing with each other for the Western consumer. But those people that think that this will go away, they should really think again, because this is here to stay. This is not going away. And this is not a small platform like Banggood or Light in a Box. These are big companies that are behind them. So.
Yeah, and it's up to us to make it more sustainable, ethical, and all.
Correct, yeah. I mean, we have to think about on the one hand, yes, we have to create that level playing field, that these web shops have to follow the same rules as other retailers here in Europe and importers need to do. And at the same time, I've lost my train of thoughts here. So that's one thing we need to do. Another thing that it will happen is, you all know AliExpress, of course. Now, AliExpress has never been incredibly successful in most of the European markets. They've been quite successful in Spain. But having seen the success of Temu and Shein, they realized, we screwed up. This could have been our market. And they are reorganizing now. They are putting the domestic e-commerce and the international e-commerce together in one new business unit. So they will have a better access to the supply chain and will therefore be able to sell better products as well.
It would be good to have another competitor and have more
competition. Basically,
is always good. Yeah.
And the last thing that is going to happen is you've all got TikTok. In the UK and in the US, they already have TikTok Shop, and they're launching it. I think today, maybe even in Spain, TikTok Shop is e-commerce inside the short video app TikTok. That will most probably also arrive in our market. So then we will have what they in China call the 4 little dragons going overseas, being Shein, Temu, AliExpress, and TikTok Shop.
Okay. Oh, well.
So this is not going away. This is just going to get, depending on how you look at it, more fierce or more worse.
Okay, I think we need to follow that closely, and we'll follow you at China Talk also with your newsletters and all your reports. I think these are my questions. Thank you very much. I think you really shared a lot of knowledge with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I hope you also enjoyed the interview, and we will make a report and we will spread the news that you should follow at Sander if you want to know more about China Tech.
Yeah, and if you're a retailer, go with me to China.
Oh yeah, that would be good. Maybe I do a job switch and join you. Thanks.
I sincerely hope you enjoyed this VNC China Café podcast. If you are interested in future VNC activities and would like to stay updated about future China cafes, please go to our website vnc-china.nl to become a member or just find out what's going on. Stay tuned for our next podcast.